welcome to what I think is probably my favourite video to film every single year, and that is my best books of the year. These are my best books of 2025 in no particular order. No, that's not true. I think I have saved my best for last, but unlike normal people who can just, I don't know, pick a group of books like your top 10 or your top 15 or whatever, I like to assign completely arbitrary categories to classify my books because I can't really compare one to another, and I don't know how people do it. I know some people don't rank their books, they just give you a list of books, but I'm me and I like to make it weird. So I have some categories for you of books, and some of these are new categories, some are returning favourites, but I'm here to tell you about the best books that I read in 2025. So I'm going to start off with the Persephone Award, and this is the Persephone Award for the best Persephone book, otherwise known as the Persephone Award for best book where all of the covers look the same. So as a booktuber, this is really annoying because I can literally be holding up any book and they all look the same. But I assure you, this is Greenbanks by Dorothy Whipple. Dorothy Whipple is a brilliant writer. Persephone, I think, published all of her books, but this is her third novel. It is set, or it was written rather, in 1932, and it is about family life both before and after the First World War. Although the war is in the novel, it doesn't feature that heavily, but the impact of it on the family is it is a plot point. This is essentially about the family who live at the house called Greenbanks. It's about the matriarch of the family, the grandmother, her children, her husband, her granddaughter, and other people. No spoilers, but it is really just about their life and about the experience of it. I think if you don't read a lot of books kind of like this, which are books by women written in the kind of early to mid 20th century, or if you've never read a Persephone book, I mean, this is a great place to start with the author, the publisher, that kind of book. It's atmospheric, it's descriptive, it's got stuff going on, but it's quite cosy, and it's just a really nice story. I read it whilst I was on holiday, and okay, admittedly, it was the first holiday in a really long time, so that could have impacted my reading experience, but I really, really love this, and I would highly recommend it, and I'm very happy that it's won the Persephone Award for the best Persephone book that I read this year. My next category, I think it's probably, I'm going to call it the best book where nothing is explained. Now, I love a book where nothing is explained and where things are kind of just left up to the imagination of the reader, where the author just trusts you to work out what on earth is going on. And this is a book that actually I got in my book advent calendar. So I read it in December, and, you know, given a bit of time and perspective, will it still be a favourite of the year? I think so, because I think it does summarise just the kind of book that I really like. Okay, Jen, should we get on with it now? So the book is Sian Collins, and it is Tóibín. This is a book which is set in the Great Freeze of 1963, where it was so cold in the UK that even the sea froze. And essentially this book is referred to as a crime novel, but I think if you have the impression going in that it is a crime novel, you might be expecting, I don't know, a murder that gets investigated and then perhaps solved. I don't think it's really about the murder, although that does happen. I think it is more about this small town and the people in it. In a lot of ways, it reminded me of a book I read a few years ago and absolutely loved, called Fallen Animals by Sheila Armstrong. And although it's very different in the way it's told, because that book starts with a dead body on a beach, and then each chapter is from a different person's perspective and you go back in time. And it's still, this book is not like that, but it still has a lot of the kind of atmosphere, the small town claustrophobia that I absolutely love in books. And it is more about the people and their lives rather than the actual thing that's happened. And although the kind of the murder does feature more heavily in this book, it's still not really about that, I don't think. And I really like that. And that's why I like books where things just aren't explained, where you don't really know, I don't want to spoil it, but you don't really know what's going on a lot of the time. And things are just kind of happening in the background, kind of almost off stage, as it were. And I really love that in a book. I really enjoyed this. I read it quite quickly and I really, really loved it. It is published by a small Welsh publisher, independent publisher called Homesick Press, and I absolutely loved it. The next category is the J.R.R. Award. Now, this is an award given whenever, annually, occasionally, but it's given to a book that I have either read or DNF'd and kept trying time and time again, just stubbornly determined that I will actually like this book because everyone says it's great. Previous winners of the J.R.R. Award include Jane Eyre, which I read in school, didn't like, and then in college, didn't like it, and then much later on, as a much older adult, I read it and I loved it. I mean, like 5 stars, who knew? Nobody told me that Jane Eyre was amazing. You all told me. And last year's winner of the J.R.R. Award was Wolf Hall. I don't think I called it the J.R.R. Award, but you'll forgive me. But Wolf Hall, I DNF'd several times. I think 3 times. I just couldn't get into it. And then eventually, who knew? Wolf Hall is a brilliant novel. I absolutely loved it. Now, I'm not saying that you need to keep reading novels that you either don't like or DNF. It's never worked for me with some other novels. But when it works, it works. The winner of the J.R.R. Award this year is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, this is another book which could have been, or the experience of it could have been affected by when I read it, because I was ill and I was lying in bed and I couldn't move, and I listened to the audiobook narrated by Andy Serkis, which could have impacted my reading of it, but I finally get it. I finally get why people love The Hobbit so much, and I really, really liked it. It does help that I've seen the movie movies. Why is it 3? But I've seen them several times now, and I think that kind of helped my understanding of the story and what is so magical about it. I'm not going to describe The Hobbit to you. It's about a hobbit. He goes on an adventure. It was really lovely, and I really enjoyed reading it this year. Now, the next category is Best Book I Probably Wouldn't Recommend to Everyone, otherwise known as Most Depressing Book I Read this year. There were several contenders for this, but the book that I have chosen is Things in Nature Merely Grow by Yiyun. This book I just thought was exceptional. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to everyone because it is very difficult to read, and I think you definitely have to be in the right place at the right time, and also I'm just not sure everyone would get something from it. But it is a memoir of Yiyun's experience with the fact that her 2 sons died by suicide, and it's kind of the memoir of that happening and her experience of that, and a memoir of her sons. She talks a lot obviously about her sons growing up, but a lot of it is about the way that she experienced grief, the way that she approached it, and the way that she approached it in an intellectual way is how she describes it. And I think that it's also about the way that people criticised her for her grief experience and her approach to grief, and blamed her for the death of her sons based on how she was reacting as well. And I just think it's absolutely fascinating. I think it got me at the right time. I don't think I could have read this a year or 2 ago, but I think it's just like the right book at the right time for the right person. You know, all of the things aligned to just make this really quite a meaningful book for me. Like I said, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to everyone. I would for the fact that it's brilliantly written and absolutely just heartbreaking, but fascinating at the same time. But I understand that it's not for everyone, but I really, really loved it. Okay, so back to the silly categories. My next book is an award for the best book about living alone on an island with a few sheep. Now, admittedly, this isn't a category that gets used every year, because not every year do we get a book about someone living alone on an island with a few sheep. But really, I think we should have more books about people living alone on an island with a few sheep, because I could do with more books like that in my life. The book I'm talking about, obviously, is Clear by Carys Davies. This very much is a Jen book. It could also, I guess, be in the category of a book that I didn't love the ending, but the overall experience of the book has stayed with me so much that I love it for that. I can kind of pretend the ending didn't happen. But I really love this book. So this book is essentially about a man who lives alone on an island with sheep. It is about this man who's lived there for a really long time by himself. And then the owner of the island wants the island back, so wants to evict this man. And then a preacher by the name of John is essentially, for money, sent to this island to evict the man who lives there. And things then happen. So it is a very quiet novel. It's quite understated. It's quite slow. It's very short. It is the kind of book, I think if you like Claire Keegan's writing, you might like Clear as well. I know lots of people love this. Lots of people didn't warm to it either, but it is very much my kind of book. The kind of isolation, and in a way I guess it's about a community, even though it's only one man. It is very much about that kind of like small island, people from outside kind of coming in, that kind of claustrophobia. I really love claustrophobia in a book. I just thought it was absolutely wonderful and I loved it so much. Now my next category, I guess it's best book of queer longing. There's always at least one a year that I love, that I read. This could also be my best buddy read of the year because, no offence to any other buddy reads, but I've really enjoyed using the Storygraph buddy read feature because I don't like feeling under pressure to read a certain amount by a certain time and then stopping and then commenting. I really like the feature that they have where you just comment and then it doesn't show the other person until they've reached that point. Anyway, the book is The Unlit Lamp by Radcliffe Hall. I read this with Jennifer from Jennifer Loves Books, and I think she loved this book as much as I did. So this was published in 1924. Radcliffe Hall is probably most well known for her first novel, The Well of Loneliness. Now that was published before this one, but this book was actually the first novel that she wrote. It was just published second. And this book is essentially about three women. It's about a mother, her daughter, and the daughter's governess and then friend, but she's a governess figure. These are very complicated women. They are very, very well fleshed out. They're very lively, passionate, infuriating characters. I loved and hated all of them equally. The mother she loves her daughter, but also hates her daughter, but is also jealous of her daughter and possessive and doesn't want her daughter to leave her and wants to keep hold of her. And the governess figure is sort of living her life through the daughter. She has all these things that she never got to do and that she never got to experience, and she gets kind of angry and frustrated when the girl doesn't do these things or when she's kind of not living the life that the governess would have wanted to live. And so she's kind of a rival and also jealous and also kind of in love, and that's why I said queer longing. It has this kind of queerness throughout the whole book, and the young girl is quite young at the beginning, so it's a little inappropriate, but there's no sexual contact between them. But the slightly older governess, she does have this kind of like queer longing for her. She almost wants to love her and be with her and be her at the same time, and I think that's probably the best summary. The girl herself, she loves and hates her mother, she loves and hates her friend, she doesn't know what's the best thing to do for anyone. She wants to do her own thing, but she feels like she has to be there for other people and to live their lives as well, and she's trying to do everything at once, and it's very confusing and very messy, and I absolutely loved this book. It's almost my book of the year. Almost. In fact, is it? Oh, I don't know. I absolutely loved it though. I thought it was brilliant. Okay, so my next category is my late to the party. It's the best book that everyone always loved, and for some reason I didn't already. But yeah, Brooklyn by Colm Tóibín is the winner of the best book everyone else has already read. So I had to read Long Island for a book group, and I'd never read Brooklyn, and Long Island is the follow-up to Brooklyn, so I thought I would read it first. I listened to the audiobook, which is narrated by Saoirse Ronan, who plays the main character Eilish in the film. I've not seen the film yet either, but I wanted to leave it a bit of time after reading the book before I watched the film. I think from what people have said, the film is quite different, but I love the book so much. I mean, I just thought it was amazing. So the book is, if you don't know, about a woman in 1950s Ireland who moves to Brooklyn, and it's not so much that she decides to move there, it's more that it gets decided for her and she just does it. And that happens with a lot of things in her life. She doesn't have a lot of agency, but it's not that her decisions are taken away from her. She just sort of lets things happen, and I think that's the same for quite a lot of characters in the book. Brooklyn is very much about that kind of claustrophobic, I love this, don't I? Small town, everyone knows everyone's business. When Eilish goes back to Ireland, those are the bits that I really, really loved. It's very, very similar in New York, in that, you know, the boarding house that she lives in, everyone knows everyone and everyone is spying on what everyone is doing and being judgmental. And it's very much the same in Ireland. And I guess if we also include Long Island in my favourite books of the year, I mean, why not? That takes it up to a nice round 10, doesn't it? If I include Brooklyn and Long Island. But Long Island has that even more claustrophobic small town feel because it's mostly set back in Ireland. After sort of 20 years later, the book is set, and then Eilish goes back to Ireland. But I mean, I love Colm Tóibín's writing. He has that kind of sparseness of prose and simplicity with so much depth and great characters and great plots. And I mean, I just loved it. I just thought it was fantastic, and I'm so glad that I finally got around to reading The Brooklyn. So now we only have 2 books left, and coincidentally it is a fiction and a non-fiction book, and it is actually a least predictable and most predictable favourite book of the year, and it's just kind of worked out this way nicely. Now, my favourite fiction book of the year is definitely the least predictable. If you had told me when I filmed this video last year for my favourite books of 2024 that my favourite book of the year would end up being a dystopian climate fiction novel, I would have said, are you out of your mind? Because that's very much not the kind of thing that I normally like. But I read Briefly Very Beautiful by Dineen, and I read this because it was on the long list for the Climate Fiction Prize, which is a new prize I'm sure many people will be paying attention to next year and in future. And this is definitely not the kind of book that I would normally go for. I don't really like dystopians because it feels too much like, well, the world is already on fire, and this is a book about the world literally being on fire. I couldn't emotionally cope, but I read this and I loved it. So what this book is about is a young woman who is living in the kind of not too distant future where the world is becoming uninhabitable because of the temperature, and she is living with her children, her young children. Her husband is away for work, and she decides that she needs to leave the town where they live in. So everything is literally on fire, but also the book tells you about social changes and the impact that it has on certain communities and the reactions that they have. So it's not really safe for her anymore. So she has to go on this journey to get away and to find safety for her children. I thought that the atmospheric descriptions of the landscape and of the places where the main character was travelling through, I thought they were brilliant. I thought the plot was great. I thought the pacing was fantastic. The voice of the character was really strong. The characters themselves were so vivid to me and so well drawn. I literally hated one of the characters in the book. I won't tell you which one or what happens because I don't want to spoil it, and I would encourage you all to read it because I loved it so much. But there was one character that I hated so much. I literally felt this visceral anger welling up inside me every time this person was mentioned. I disliked him so much. Anyway, calm down. Whew. The fact that this book has stayed with me and these characters have stayed with me for so long really, I think, tells me just what a brilliant book it is. I absolutely loved it, and I wish more people would go and read it. I just think it's absolutely fantastic. So moving on to my final category, which is my best book of the year, I think. My best non-fiction, certainly, and definitely the award for the most predictable book of the year. Because if you had told me 12 months ago, Jen, your best book of the year in 2025 will be a book by Hannah Kent, I would say, well, of course it is. I love Hannah Kent. I love literally everything she's ever written. So she's the author of, in order, Burial Rites, which is a book and I was going to say non-fiction. No, it's not. It's a fiction book of historical fiction set in Iceland, and it is about the last woman to be executed in Iceland in 1829, I think, off the top of my head. Hannah Kent's second novel was The Good People, which is set in Ireland, and her third novel was Devotion, which is set mostly on a boat between Europe and Australia. But her first non-fiction book is the book which I loved more than anything else that I read this year, and that book is called Always Home, Always Homesick, a love letter to Iceland. And this book I think is quite hard to completely pin down and define. It is, on the one hand, a memoir of her time as a student in Iceland. She went when she was 16, 17, and stayed with several host families, and it's about her experience as a student, her experience in Iceland, her experience with the language, with the culture, and the impact that Iceland continues to have on her to this day. It is, as the subtitle says, a love letter to Iceland, so you really do fall in love with the country when she is taking you through this story about how much she loves Iceland herself. And it is, I guess, also just a love letter to Iceland, as it says. It's about how wonderful a country Iceland is, and about experiencing that as an outsider and someone who's from a very different temperature of country and also completely different culture entirely. And I think it's also a memoir of, I guess, writing and her growing up wanting to be a writer, becoming a writer. It's about the experience of researching a historical fiction book. It's about what it's like to write about a real historical person, and especially an Icelandic person. The Icelandic culture, as she tells us, is very interested in ancestry and very interested in history. So there are lots of people who are still alive who are related to people in her book. And the experience of kind of promoting her book in Iceland and what makes an Icelandic novel. Can you write an Icelandic novel if you're not from Iceland? Which I thought she addressed quite well and was really interesting. But it is an experience of what it's like to be a writer and what it's like to be a writer of historical fiction. And it's a kind of behind the curtains look at the writing experience and being a writer. And for all of those reasons, I just thought it was brilliant. I am completely biased because, as you can tell, I love Hannah Kent's writing, and there is just, I think, something about the way that she writes, the kind of turns of phrase that she uses, that really gets me on a very deep personal level. Everything she's written makes me cry, either sad or happy tears, but it just really emotionally connects with me, and I just really, really love it. So I'm obviously completely biased, but I just think it's a really, really exceptional book. I loved the reading experience, and I would highly recommend it to you all. So I would love to know if you have read any of these books that I have mentioned, and I would love to know what your favourite books of the year are. If you have a channel and you have posted a video that you don't think I've watched yet, do let me know in the comments. If you don't have a channel, just let me know what one book is your favourite of the year. What would you pick out of all of the books that you have read? And do let me know all of your thoughts in the comments, and until next time, thank you so much for watching.